Well, I don't see it. Oh, now it goes live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Knucklehead Pods Network version of the Pigskin Preview. We're here tonight with Chris Rose, Baltimore Blaine, Shane McGowan, and myself, Mark Hirsch. And we want to apologize to our faithful listeners right off the bat for the problems with the technical side on Blog Talk with Mancini Sports. And the reason we started this new networks is so that we can fill in the blanks when those things happen. So once again, you can find us on YouTube or iTunes, Knuckleheads Pod Network. And you can also reach us at our email, knuckleheadspod.
Knucklehead Pods. So it's Knucklehead, singular, pods, plural.
Knuckleheadpods at gmail.com. And feel free to write into us. We love you, and we love when you write to us. And also, if you're listening to this broadcast, if you subscribe to us, it'll help to boost our rating on YouTube, and it'll help you to find us easier on a search function there. So we have, having not been on the air for 3 weeks now, we have a loaded schedule. The free agency period is in full swing. There's a lot of news. Tonight we're going to talk about things over at the Seahawks with Michael Bennett and Sherman. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Packers and their free agency choices leading into the Raiders. We're going to talk about Crabtree's move to the Ravens and any controversy that might go along that. The Ravens' new weapons, a tribute to Danny Woodhead, Jacksonville, Kansas City and Mahomes, Jets trade, as well as some other things. So I'm going to start off by talking just a little bit about the Packers. The Packers have traditionally, under Ted Thompson, stood on the sidelines during free agency. They had a policy of growing their team through the draft and stayed out of free agency. There's a new general manager in town, John Gutekunst, and he has been going for it. The Packers haven't had a lot of room on the salary cap. But the first thing that came out in the news was the release of Jordy Nelson. And Jordy Nelson is a longtime favorite of Packer fans. And my understanding is that he was offered a contract that would make it possible for the Packers to make some moves under the salary cap, but he rejected that. So what did the Packers do? They re-signed Randall Cobb. They brought in Jimmy Graham, tight end, who is going to be a valuable contributor to the team, and are shoring up their defensive pass rush. They brought in Muhammad Wilkerson. So Jordy Nelson is off to the Raiders. And with that, I'm going to switch over to Shane McGowan, who's got all the Raider news. Shane, take it away.
Well, thank you very much there, Mr. Hirsch. And you know what? We've got a lot to discuss. There's so much happening right now with all these teams that are picking up, trading up for draft picks, etc. Right now, you know what? When I look at what Oakland's trying to do, they are making moves in their secondary. And why? Because Gruden is a defensive guy. He is making a lot of different things right now. And with that, he's definitely working on the safeties and the corners. He's already gotten himself in there where he's got the guys that he had before, because it's going to be almost a whole new secondary back there. And it's needed. I'm going to be the first to say that. Last year, the offense was not bad. Defensively, they gave up way too much. And it's been discussed throughout the entire season. And I was the first to critique them as well. You got one guy on that line in Khalil Mack who's trying to do everything he can, and it's not enough, and especially when your secondary doesn't have enough guys up there to cover. So they brought in some guys at the corners with Rashawn Melvin, Sarhish Wright. They're bringing in a new safety as well. And again, they're going to let go of guys. Armisen, Smith, and Carey are all going to be out. So like I said, they're trying to make some changes. They're trying to make a statement. They're trying to go in there and say, listen, you're not going to be able to throw against us on these short or long or deep balls or anything like that. So I do like the fact of the being a little bit more aggressive. It's going to be interesting how they draft this year, what Reggie and the team is going to do with picking. But again, we get Jordy in there. We gave up Crabtree. Now, a lot of times you're saying, well, is Crabtree disciplined enough to play? He has a lot of outbursts. He's shown a lot of uncharacteristics at times out there on the field, but he has been able to catch that ball when needed, and that's been a huge thing. So they believe giving up Crabtree to get Jordy in there is going to be their saving grace. Baltimore now is the ones that are getting Mr. Crabtree, and we're going to discuss that there with Mr. Baltimore Blaine in a little bit, but I believe Mr. Chris Rose, do you have some things you'd like to add to all of this?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that's been going on, and I think what you see a lot. Actually, what I want to start off with is Green Bay, and I think Green Bay getting Jimmy Graham, which is why they were okay letting Jordy go. I think that quarterback who throws more in the red zone than any quarterback in, I think, history, or definitely the most recent history. And what you saw Seattle do, people forget Jimmy Graham caught more touchdowns than any tight end in the league, with about half as many catches as the next guy down. And there's just so many things you can do where you bunch up and then you pull one guy out. And if you can get that one guy on one guy out there, Rodgers is going to hit him. I mean, Rodgers is going to hit him. There's no doubt about it. I think that is just such the biggest move that we've seen in the offseason so far that really scares me as a fan of an NFC team. I think that is going to be, because that's the one thing he's never had. He's never had that. And on the Raiders, I think that Jordy move was kind of silly. I'm not sure why that. I mean, he's a great. I shouldn't say it's silly. He's a great player. Raiders are trying to do a lot of things, but for whatever's going on there, there's a lot of news with the Raiders that just keeps coming across, or you don't get a lot of solid news. You see Ndamukong Suh just canceled his visit there because of some type of problem he had with them. You see, Jordy signing, Crabtree gets let go. I think what you see there is kind of going back to what Shane just talked about, is a change of ideas in that old school how to play. I don't want any drama that Gruden is taking over and showing, which is a get ready Crabtree. I don't even want Sue in here. So the word on the street is Reggie tried to bring him in, and Gruden was kind of like, I don't want those kind of problems in my building as I'm starting a new team. So, how much of that is real and not, it certainly looks like he's willing to trade, an injury-plagued player like Jordy for a problematic player like Crab, and do it very quickly. So I think that might be something new with the culture. I know Mr. Hirsch has something he wants to add on the Raiders, and let's hear from our good buddy Baltimore Blaine for the first time tonight.
Thank you, Chris. About the Raiders, I think I agree with you 100% that Gruden is going back to the old school. He's not going to tolerate any kind of BS in his locker room, and Crabtree had to go. As far as Jordy Nelson goes, I think it's a good get for them. And Jordy Nelson is by no means an injury-plagued player. He had one ACL that knocked him out for most of the season. And it's true that when he came back, he didn't seem to be performing up to his old speed. He seemed to have lost a step or two there. But if a quarterback can adjust to him, he's still a dangerous player. He's got good hands. He's a good streaking down the sidelines. And I think it's going to be nothing but a positive for the Raiders. Baltimore Blaine.
Well, we have Jordy Nelson. The signing of Jimmy Graham, possibly facilitating the release of Jordy Nelson, who signs with the Raiders, possibly facilitating the release of Michael Crabtree. So it shows you, the chain of events as they can happen in the NFL if that is really the case. But Shane, I'd like to get your opinion, since you're the Raider guy here. How do you see this as an upgrade, or a step back, or a lateral move, talent-wise?
No, I actually, like I said, I think it's an upgrade in many ways too. I think you're going to get a disciplined player. The Raiders are getting a disciplined player with Jordy. There's no question about that. You're getting a guy who can catch the ball too. He's made some key catches by Aaron Rodgers out there. Let's not take anything away from, like Mr. Hirsch said, this guy can catch. He can play. He can do a lot of things that's needed of him. The only thing is, like I said, Crabtree brought a lot of, at times, some dynamics in there, being double teamed that he could get away with a couple of good things. But the problem with Crabtree that I always found in the system was the fact that he caused a lot of problems of being undisciplined at certain times of the game that were crucial. Those are the things you have to eliminate in order to keep moving on. And that to me is now done with him being, sent over to you to the Baltimore. And I think Jordy's going to fill in that spot real nice. I think he's going to do exactly what's needed to be done of him. And I think, though, we're also forgetting, Cooper on the other side of that is the guy that really is a deep threat. He's the guy that's got to step up his game and play at this next level right now. They're relying on him to do a lot more, and they got to get the offensive system working for it. I put a lot of blame on the coordinators there too. Don't get me wrong. It's not always on players. We got to look at coaches too, but I put a lot of it on them. So, Mr. Rose, what do you think about that?
Sorry there. So yeah, that was actually, you kind of answered. So my question to you was going to be, so does this show, I know you've been very vocal about how much you hated that offensive coordinator. So it was we'll pass it back to Blaine after this, but let us know, do you think this shows that Gruden feels that job was done so poorly and that he can get more out of Cooper, and that's why he's kind of made this move?
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, look at, even if you've ever listened to Gruden during certain games, he's very critical about the coaches as well. It doesn't matter what teams are playing. But I mean, as the Raider guy, and I watch and people that I work with too, and things like this, you're looking at a coordinator that absolutely they went out of their way, Del Rio, to get this guy and sign him to big money because they thought they were going to lose this young, talented guy, and he couldn't get the system to work for the Raiders on offense. Derek Carr never looked comfortable. Marshawn Lynch couldn't get the ball the way he needed to. The O-line didn't block nearly as good as they did the year before, but yet you had everybody out there. And you could say, well, we had a couple of injuries. No, that's not it at all. It became down to the schemes, and that's where they blew it in many times. So, yeah, they had some great plays, and they also had some good games, but they really did some things that were just not good in any way offensively. So that comes down to the coordinators, not always on the players, and that's where I voiced that one. Mr. Blaine.
Well, I like the going back to the Packers. I like that signing of Jimmy Graham, and that's to me that's my favorite signing by the Packers. And now they have Deshaun Kaiser as a backup there to Aaron Rodgers. As far as the Raiders are concerned, I'm just going to sit back and watch what Gruden does. It's a new regime there. I know that with the Crabtree thing, if you as coming to the Ravens, we need him. I welcome him, and I just hope he just leaves his chains, and jewelry in the locker room or at home, because all I can see is I can see the Bengals and Steelers defensive players grabbing at it, his necklace, because they know that he'll melt down. But Mr. Rose.
Yeah, and that player, we can talk about him in a bit. And I mean, Crabtree's just problematic. I'm watching the all my Niner fans and my Niner friends, because I grew up in the Bay as a Seahawks fan who just hated Sherman. All of a sudden, you watch him just wishy-washy changing over, and we'll get to that in a second. But part of me, even though I hate Crabtree, I realize that I'm guilty of the hypocrisy too, because part of me wanted Crabtree to sign with the Seahawks and beat Sherman just to give him a little But I'm not really mad at Sherman Seahawks fans, don't worry. We'll talk about that in a second. But I actually want to talk about something that is really bugging me, and it's got to do with one of our anytime something that's big happens and it has to do with one of our homer teams. I want to talk about the weapons that the Ravens have put on, which I think are pretty positive in a lot of ways, theoretically. But I'd like to talk about what everyone is saying is basically, man, you guys kind of look like you really screwed that kid over. And for those of you on the, I mean, it looks like so shady that there's not a single person defending you in the news. I don't listen to Baltimore news, but I mean, it looks pretty bad. So for those of you out there who don't know what I'm talking about, basically what happened is the new regime. I mean, Ozzy's still there, but he's not the GM anymore. And they went out and picked up a speed receiver who's never really. Wait, no, you're going last. We're all going to go around.
No, I just wanted to make a correction there. He is the GM. He is still the GM for this year. This is his last year.
Okay, well then I apologize for that. Thank you for that. So I guess what I was reading about is they're kind of bringing someone else in to help, but I was going to get to the point where he's not the GM, but he still seems to be doing GM things. So that makes a lot more sense. Thank you for that. Sorry, Baltimore fans, for the misinformation. But basically, they brought in this kid and they overpaid him by everybody's estimation in the league. Anyone who follows the league, and the day after that, they found out that Crabtree was on the market. This kid fails his physical after writing to all his family and friends about how he's about to go cash a check and looking, he's celebrating. I'm talking about Ryan Grant. And then they pick up Crabtree for about the same money, who's a much more seasoned player. And then the kid goes to two other teams and does not fail his physical, and now has signed for a much, much smaller contract. And it just looks like the Ravens really just kind of did the guy dirty. So, not that Mr. Hirsch knows anything about this legally, as far as what actually transpired, because none of us do. I just want to get just the fans' perspective from Mr. Hirsch. Then we'll go to Coach Shane, and of course, we will allow our good friend Baltimore Blaine to defend his team. But Mr. Hirsch, what do you think about this? Because when you look at it, it looks pretty bad.
Yeah, it looks suspicious to me. And, like the Ravens tried to shed themselves of this guy, this kid, and get rid of the obligations financially to him in order to sign Crabtree. That's what it looks like. I don't know the ins and outs of this, but when he failed his physical, was that a Ravens team doctor that did that? I mean, I'm sure if it was, that he knows who signs his paycheck. And I don't know. It looks suspicious to me. Blaine? Shane.
Yeah. No, yeah. It does look very suspicious. No question about that. And again, I mean, we've heard this numerous times. Is all of a sudden some guy, he can't pass the physical on one team, but all of a sudden he passes it on another. So I mean, it's a little interesting in that way. You're right. I got a feeling it's kind of like, yeah, we got to free up some cash to sign this guy that just became released by a certain team, and that happened to be the Mr. Crabtree from the Raiders. So yeah, I think it's a little suspicious. So I'm in that same boat with you there, Mr. Hirsch. Mr. Blaine.
So guys, let me
Get it,
settle
Blaine.
you down here for a minute. Okay. I know, and it's part of the drama of the beginning of the football season and free agent opening. Here's the problem: when you're doing the non-tampering period of the 48 hours where you're negotiating, you can't do a physical. So I'm going to refer you back to something that happened between the Rams and the Raiders back in, I believe it was 2014, with what was the player's name? Saffold, I believe it was. The Rams gave him a clearing physical, passed him on his clearing physical. It was Roger Stafford, an offensive tackle. Raiders decided they wanted him, signed him to a 5-year, or were ready to sign him to a 5-year, $42.5 million contract. But he failed their physical. Why is it that these things come out? See, during where we are right now, when a player, if I was to go into the Ravens facility and they wanted to sign me, I'd take a physical right there before they would announce the deal. During that 48-hour period, you can't have that kind of contact. You're talking with agents. So you wait, and everything that comes out there, if you look at every news signing or agreement that came out there, agreed to this, agreed to that, pending physical. Now, so this guy, Ryan Grant, gets a pass on a physical out of DC. They say, okay, your ankle's fine. Go out and happy trails. He comes to the Ravens. They sign him, or they agree to this deal in the non-tampering agreement. They set up a press conference because they also signed or came to agreement with Smokey Brown for a 1-year contract. Now, Smokey Brown had worse injuries, coming off a worse injury than Grant. But the ankle, if you look at the diagram of an ankle complex, it is a very complex joint. So you look at the Ravens, they agreed to sign this kid and give him $14 million over the term of the contract, $14 million in injury guarantee. When they looked at his ankle, they saw something they didn't like. Going back to the Saffold deal, there's a doctor, Dr. David Chow, who has 17 years as a physician in the locker room and on the sidelines. He had, and you can Google this. He explains it. He says medicine or diagnoses are not a science; they're an art. One group of doctors look at one thing. Another group of doctors look at the same thing. They can come up with two different conclusions. Part of that, possibly that happened from Washington, is they were familiar with this kid. They saw, how he played through it. They said, okay, yeah, you did pretty well. Go ahead. Ravens aren't familiar with him. They're going to give him a big contract. And they look and they say, no, we're not going to, wait a minute. And I want to bring something else up. They were open to readdressing this deal, but the agent didn't want to. So he goes off to the Raiders. Supposedly they pass him. He goes off to Indy. They pass him. But what did they sign him to? A $5 million 1-year deal. Why not multiple years? Nobody, I don't know. Apparently that's the best offer he got. So I want you to keep in mind that here's a kid who was on a multi-year deal. And if his ankle is all that great, and coach wanted him, why isn't he on a multi-year deal? It sounds like to me, it's a prove-it deal. And one other thing. They came to agreement with this kid on Tuesday night. Jordy Nelson was released in the afternoon, and they started pursuing Jordy Nelson. And they wanted to bring him to Baltimore, but he signed with the Raiders. Then Raiders jettison Crabtree. But that rumor has been out there since the end of the season that Crabtree might get released. So this whole thing about, Crabtree was conveniently, came up and, they just wanted to get out of the contract. No. I mean, what team would do that? I mean, now you're talking about if they're doing something that shady, it's going to affect the reputation, and no free agents or agents are going to want to send their guys there. So it's just ridiculous, when it comes down to it. And as this Dr. Chow points out, he says it's like buying a house. You reach an agreement. The two sides reach an agreement, pending the inspection. It goes into escrow. You get the inspection. The inspection fails. The deal is null and void. Also, they continued to pursue Jordy Nelson after they came to an agreement because they wanted Grant and Brown on the team, and they wanted to add a veteran. So this whole thing, and one more thing. They're bringing in Cam Meredith, who tore up his knee last year. He was out all season. Bears let him go after a physical. Didn't even, they gave him, a tender, same round tender, which he was undrafted. So it comes to like 1.9 million. And if he goes to the Ravens and the Ravens sign him, they don't have to give up anything. So, why would you bring in, if you're that, shady about injuries or you're afraid of injuries? I'm gonna tell you, the Ravens have never been afraid of injury or criticisms, I should say. Joe Flacco's contract, they stuck behind it. They didn't try to get out of that and say, oh, well, everybody's saying that's a bad deal, so maybe we should just go ahead and, and say there's something wrong with his arm. No. So, come on, it's this conspiracy theory stuff it just makes no sense.
Well, Baltimore Blaine, it's Mark Hirsch. I agree with you, what you said, that doctors always look at some different aspect of the situation. And, I was a criminal defense attorney for many, many years, and I used to go in front of juries. And, if there's one thing that I have a nose for, it's a rat. And I think these doctors were looking at the big contract that had been signed and all the things they could do with the money if they got out of the contract. I don't think it's a coincidence that the other teams have cleared him medically, and he ended up getting
But they're
signed.
still signing.
Well,
but they're still signing guys. I mean,
so
they were still pursuing because
Hold on,
Michael Crabtree's.
let him go. Let him go, Baltimore Blaine. You're gonna get your chance.
Yeah.
All right,
Blaine, you already had like three more, one more things.
I've got another one more thing.
Well,
You're
yeah,
giving me more.
I mean, I don't blame a guy for sticking up for his team, but the Ravens clearly had buyer's remorse on this. They paid way too much money to him, so they bring in the doctor. Oh, he didn't pass the physical because they had an out. They had an out on the physical, and they took that money and they're going to get a bunch of more guys for the same price. So, 1 + 1 = 2, and it's real easy. I mean, if he would have went to the other teams and failed the physicals there, I wouldn't have a thing to say about the Ravens. But, this doesn't smell good. And it's not the worst thing that any team has ever done. And business is business. And businessmen don't really care if other people, what they think about them, because if they're going to make a deal with somebody, they'll make a deal with somebody. And even if that person knows that they welshed out of a deal with somebody else, if a player wants a deal and they offer him a deal, they'll take it. They're not going to say, no, I'm not going to sign with you because you failed Ryan Grant on his physical. That's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense at all. So, yeah, obviously I have a strong opinion on this. And who's next in line here, Chris Rose, or is it Shane?
Yeah. No, you know what? Like I said, I agree with what you said, Mr. Hirsch. I know, Mr. Blaine, I mean, it's always going to happen. This is the thing. It's always going to be happening somehow. Some team is going to get the same situation. It just happened to be your team. All right. That's really what it came down to. Mr. Rose, what else do we got on the agenda right now?
Well, I want to say something about that.
I want to wait. Let me close this out real quick, Blaine, and then
Okay.
I'll give you a shot.
All
I also want to make people understand that while we do call it shady, the Ravens have done nothing illegal. It's kind of not. I'm not sure what our rating is on this new show, so I'll say it's ishy for that kid who was coming in. But the coincidence of when those other players came about and the fact that they knew that they had a way to do it makes it look so little. But to be fair, they've done nothing illegal. So, Blaine, I'll let you close it out with, and no more one more thing, just a 1 minute close out on this deal. And then you can tell me what you think about the actual moves that have gone through the physical. Do you think that it is totally impossible that a very sharp person like Ozzy decided, hey, you know what? I can work within the law, and since I did nothing against the law, I'm going to do what's best for the team.
It's easy. I watch this team. This is the team that I follow closely out of all the teams. This is not their MO. This is not what's going on. ESPN has defended them, going back to when they brought in Brock Marion, the safety for the Cowboys, and they announced a news conference and then reneged after seeing something on his X-ray. He played for another 7 years or so, and then they found something in his shoulder on the X-ray that the Ravens had said. So it's all about whether or not you want to put your money into a player, as invest into a player as much as you were intending to, after finding out that there's something they may not be able to do what you expected them to do. And that's point blank. There's nothing shady, scandalous going on here. It's all for fodder, and it's entertainment for you guys and whoever wants to think that something shady is going on here. It's not. If you put all the pieces together, like I said, and you follow what the Ravens are doing, they're revamping their wide receiver core. And on that note, as far as what they've done so far, I like the addition of Smokey Brown. He requested a 1-year contract, prove it contract, a 1-year contract for $5 million. And I think that's a great addition. Gano, Mike Wallace at this point, Michael Campanaro at this point. They're still open to bringing those players back if they don't land somewhere else, or if they don't get all the pieces they want. They also have who else? They don't have Ryan Grant, as you know, Michael Crabtree. They're looking to add. Like I said, they're bringing in Cam. Geez, I just
Cam
said his
Meredith.
name.
Cam Meredith.
Cam Meredith. Cam
Whose
Meredith
knee-
and
whose knee is about as good as your ability to do a 1-minute answer.
and Snead. I moved on, dude. I mean, you guys, I moved on. I'm into the second part of this.
I know.
You saying how do you wanted me to evaluate?
I'm giving you a
All
hard
right,
time.
all right.
I'm giving you a hard time to move things along. But
Yes.
yeah.
So that's what I mean. They're still building. They're still building the wide receiver core, and this is what they got so far. They're still pursuing wide receivers, and they're expected to take one in the draft and a tight end somewhere along the line.
No, I think it's okay for that. So, in using the Ravens, I think we've talked enough about the Ravens, but I do want to talk very quickly about one of my favorite players who technically was the Raven for a quick couple of seconds, but my man, the little guy, the guy that when I was a young kid and figured out how big I would be, would love to have been, but it never happened. The reason why I was a Steve Largent fan, but until I figured out, physics about how fast I was going to be and how big I was going to be, I couldn't do it. Danny Woodhead. Danny Woodhead retired. Sorry he didn't get to do too much for you guys. But Danny Woodhead, people forget, was one of the top rushers in college football history. And didn't catch the eye of a couple of teams, caught the eye of Bill Belichick, and then goes to San Diego, does some amazing stuff. And, after some injuries, I think that his career is awesome. I think that just if you ever meet the guy in person, just the fact that he was as successful as he was is amazing. And I just want to give a little nod, even though it's not a Raven, and it's kind of a poor, not a very good segue. I would like to just give a little shout out if we'll go Hirsch, and then Shane, as far as what you think about Woodhead. But I think he's great, and maybe I like to make 100% hear Shane's take on what it would take to be a guy that size and be that successful mental wise.
Well, I think you've said it all about Danny Woodhead. I mean, he was a key player everywhere he went, and he had the hustle, and he's going to be missed from the game, and I think he's going to be a future Hall of Famer.
Wow.
Shane?
Yeah. Oh, no, there's no question about that. I mean, yeah, exactly. His personality was game mind. He wanted to win. He wanted to play. He just did everything in that way. And that's the type of guy that you want to coach. I mean, you love that type of a player. You love the attitude, the enthusiasm, the energy, everything that guy can bring. That's what you want. And you want the rest of the players on that team to see that. And to me, you would love to have, 24 guys like that sitting there going, this is us. This is what we're all about. So you're absolutely correct. I believe everything Mr. Hirsch just said, and yourself there, Mr. Rose. Awesome, man. Definitely deserves all the credit in the world, and good for him to get out of the game when he's ready to, and it's perfect for him. Mr. Blaine.
Yeah, he was the Rudy, the real life Rudy of the NFL, and tough-minded guy, great work ethic, and unfortunately, he, as Chris alluded to, he had an abbreviated season with us, with the Ravens, and we would have liked to got more out of him, but that's how it goes. He was at the tail end of his career, and good luck to him. I don't know if he'll make the Hall of Fame. If I'm going to go that far, but definitely a player that was fun to watch.
Well, I agree with that. As I said before, and we're going to talk about some new things here today. And I'm going to start off by mentioning the Seattle Seahawks. And when Chris Rose can follow up at the end of the train on this, but the Seahawks seem to be in a rebuilding mode. And the big news is Sherman and Bennett, both gone. So I'm going to pass the ball over to you, Shane. What do you think about the Seahawks trading away their battle-proven excellent guys?
Well, there's no question. I think you nailed that one right there. They're going into the rebuilding, but they're also going into we need to change the atmosphere in the locker room and on this team. And I think to them, by getting rid of what they may have feel was a little bit of extra controversy that came to this team on losses, and it made it very difficult for them afterwards with media and etc. I think finally it just came to a boiling point where they said, that's it. Let's cut our losses. Let's move on. Let's go into younger generation. We believe we've got more talent that can come in here. And again, I mean, look, they gotta work on both sides. They gotta work on the offense, they gotta work on the defense, and they gotta work on the special teams. Right now, they got rid of some key guys on that defense, but like I said, they're going to pick it up. They will. There's no question about it. And I think it's going to come within the next little bit. Draft is going to be huge for them. Transactions and getting people in there from key free agencies is going to be also very crucial too here. Depending on what happens when it comes down to camp and who gets injured and not, I think it's going to dictate a lot of things. But offensively, look at, they haven't had a solid running game for how long now? They've gone through more running backs than I've ever seen in a league. So they definitely need to be looking and say, we got to get somebody in here that can carry this rock for us, because Russell can't be doing this all by himself. And I know Mr. Rose will jump in on this one when it comes time, but they need help on that. They need to make sure that he's got his time and some deep threats out there as well. So like I said, Seattle, I believe you're absolutely correct there, Mr. Hirsch, is they are looking to reformulate, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, and get themselves back on track. But I'm going to leave it to the expert there and Mr. Chris Rose on his great Seattle Seahawks.
Well, great is one thing. And this is one thing that I think that a lot of people should remember is I am a lifelong fan. And the criticism that comes to fair weather fans and that kind of thing is legit a lot of times. But people forget I became a fan when the Niners were winning every Super Bowl in a row because I wanted to be Steve Largent in 1982 and 83. And I've stuck with them when we were the worst team in the NFL. So as I've mentioned a lot of times, we take these windows when we're actually good and we run with them. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But now that people actually want to hear what I have to say on the air, I got to be honest. Like, I'm going to stick with my team. But me trying to be super optimistic about a team that is obviously in huge amounts of transition, has obviously had, as Coach Shane brought up a bunch of times this last year, that getting crazy and going against the coaches and having fights on the sideline is cool if you can pull out the wins. And when you can't, you got to blow it up. So I want to use like a story that is a success Pete Carroll story. Sorry, I'll be fast on this, guys. I'll go a little faster. When he took over, he had TJ Houshmandzadeh on the team. He told the whole team to get up and move the seats in a meeting, and he was the only guy that didn't. He traded him the next day. I think about halfway through this season, he figured out that he was just going to blow the whole thing up. And not only did he blow the whole thing up player-wise,
he's blowing it up coach-wise. So I'm going to let, since I clicked off for a second, I want to let Blaine talk about what he sees in Bennett and Sherman. But I'm pretty sure that basically what it is some competitive guys that Pete just decided I don't want anymore, and who had backloaded contracts that didn't make sense. So, Blaine, why don't you go ahead?
I think that they're trying to get younger. I think that they're that it is a rebuilding or a retooling. It maybe, if you want to, to a lesser degree. Bennett moves to Philadelphia now and becomes part of that crazy good, awesome defensive line. To add depth there. Sherman moves to 49ers, and it's really a toss-up how effective he's going to be there coming off of his injuries. He's saying all the right things, but he is coming off a serious injury. So let's see if he's got what he's got in the tank and how much he can contribute this season to that young 49ers team. Mr. Hirsch?
Well, I think I've said all I have to say about the Seahawks. I think they're rebuilding. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think, or I should say, I wouldn't think it was right if some team was winning and winning. I think that's why so many people are always rooting against the Patriots, is because they win too much. But their day will come as well. Every team goes through a rebuilding thing. I remember back in the 70s when the Packers were just terrible. And I was still a Packer fan. And true fans stick to their team. But cheer up, Mr. Chris Rose. They're rebuilding, and hopefully there's better days to come. But I don't think it's going to be next year. And I think that that's a wise course for Pete Carroll to take, is to start rebuilding his team now instead of trying to go for it next year and pull out all the stops for that and not being taking care of business. So Shane McGowan. Go ahead.
I apologize. So real quick, and then we'll start a new subject here, since I kind of missed part of the Seahawk deal.
Well, you sound like Blaine now with just one more thing.
No, Mr. Hirsch, you're full of sunshine today.
It's one more thing because my mic dropped out for a couple of seconds, so I didn't get a chance to say one thing that I thought of after you started. So people act like this team is, they went 2-14 and were horrible last year. They were 9-7 with a kicker that lost them 3 games. So it's not like they're completely out of it. So I want to get people to yeah, I know you do. And until your kicker sucks, while you still have that kicker, that great kicker, and that's funny. Something real quick. One more thing, Mr. Hirsch. One more thing. Kickers are getting the highest salary that they've had at this free agency ever. They're getting millions and millions of dollars to really be put on. I mean, it's interesting, like how much these kickers are making, because they see some of these teams that the difference between playoffs and where you are at is kickers, basically. So I'm not going to quite say the Seahawks are rebuilding because they're building around a certain player. Maybe not tonight, but on a different night, I'm going to talk about how I do not like a lot of the Seahawks moves, but I'm going to fight the rebuilding talk for a while. Shane, why don't we give you a chance to kind of wax poetic and talk about what's on your mind, what you've seen as far as free agency so far, and then we'll let Blaine and Mr. Hirsch follow up after you.
Yeah, but Chris, just one more thing.
Huh?
Those kickers are great until they have a bad year, and it happens to them all. Shane, take it away.
No, wait. Seahawks 3 losses. You had a kicker miss the last kick, and in 2 of them missed 3 kicks. That's different. Okay, Shane, go ahead now, because I just took away Mark Hirsch's last word. Go.
Oh, I need a Tylenol. You guys are giving me a headache here. Okay. All right. You know what? Actually, this has been awesome and loving all the jabs back and forth. But you know what? Here's the one thing I want to bring up, and I'm just going to pass this around to each one of you guys on a quick quick note on each thing I'm going to say about the best bargains through first week of free agency. Now, I've been, I write a little bit for USA Today and places like that too. And some guys have been contacting me and saying, what do you think about this, Shane? And so on and so on. So one of them is going to be, my first one is going to be Mr. Morgan Burnett. And I know Mr. Hirsch, you would know because he comes from your great Packer team. Now, he signed a 3-year contract for $14 million with the Steelers. So I'm sure Dina's going to be happy. What do you think about the Steelers getting him? Is he worth it? Do you think he's got the talent to still keep going forward? I mean, he is, the 29-year-old, and I do think that yes, it's a pretty good deal, I think, so far for the Steelers. What's your take on this one?
Well, I have to agree with you. I think Morgan Burnett is going to be missed, and I don't have the details on what his salary was with the Packers and how that figured into their cap space. And I know coming into the free agency, they only had about $18 million in cap space and wanted to make some moves. And, so Morgan Burnett is gone. Clinton Dix is still back there in the safety zone there. And this is one of the things that I struggle with is because the weak spot of the Packers is the defensive backfield. They let Micah Hyde go. They let Casey Hayward go. Now Morgan Burnett's gone. I just don't understand it, but it's got to be a plus for the Steelers.
Anything that helps the Steelers, I don't like. And I think this is going to help the Steelers. They've got a very soft secondary. It's been a problem with theirs for years now. And now they're giving up the run. And they're up against the cap. So they have to be wise about who they add. I think this is probably going to work out for them. So yeah, I think it's a good sign. I think it'll help them.
Well, don't worry about the Steelers, Blaine, because they've got a lot of problems.
They got more problems than people really want to let on. From what I saw last year, yeah.
I mean,
including
they got
one at running
issue.
back.
Well, they got an issue at running back, and they got an issue at quarterback, and who's the heir apparent, and all that kind of stuff. So, Chris Rose.
I'm actually going to take your question and flip it on its head a little bit regarding something that we've talked about a lot. I think that some of the people really that thought were going to be huge really got, I don't know what the word we're allowed to use here on PG radio, but, AJ McCarron. I mean, you look at some of the quarterbacks and what they got last year, and in a time when people need quarterbacks, especially in the AFC, and what he got paid backup money. I mean, he really, really, really got messed up. That really surprised me. So
hold on, Chris. Don't go there yet, because I got a few more that I'm going to go down. So just answer this one question. What do you think of this deal of him going to the Steelers? Is it a good move for the Steelers? Is he that type of player that can help them?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, this is what I'm saying. These are the best weeks so far of free agency. Now I'm going to go to the next guy, who's going to be Mr. Mike Pouncey of the Chargers. He's now with the Chargers. He signs 2 years, $15 million, $10 million guaranteed. I mean, really, he's a Pro Bowler. They're getting a Pro Bowl leader experience to play between. And I mean, this is a guy that's got a lot of talent out there. So did the Chargers get a good pick with this one? What's your take on this one, Mr. Hirsch?
Well, I think they did get a good pick on this. I'm surprised that they gave them so much money. I don't know what their cap space situation was, but, these guys are veterans, and what can you say? You pick up a veteran that it doesn't have injuries plaguing them, and you plug them into your scheme. It's got to be a plus. Blaine?
Any help that they can get on that offensive line is yes, that's a plus. I mean, I saw Phillip Rivers running around a lot last year. So yeah, any help to protect Phillip Rivers, yeah, I think it's a good deal.
I think the center position is the most underrated position in football. And I think that while I'm worried about him and his let's just say he's a great player that might have some off the field possible problems. I'll leave it at that.
No, and that's fair. But this is where I said the Chargers seem to want to take a chance with it, so they signed him, and they're hoping that you're absolutely correct, helping in there to protect Mr. Phillips. And so I think it's going to be an interesting. Now I'm going to go to another one here. This man here, Mr. LeGarrette Blount, signs with the Lions. He gets a 1-year, $2 million guaranteed contract. The guy's got every time he goes somewhere, he's winning a Super Bowl ring. I mean, which is fun. Hello.
Hello, what happened?
Yeah,
there we go.
It went down.
Yeah.
I see the same thing. Everyone just stopped talking.
Were we all
Yeah,
down?
it just went down.
I know I was.
Yep.
Okay.
So here.
That's fine. Well, it's still recording straight. I can cut that up. But yeah, that's weird.
Okay.
Because I'm staring at the same thing and everyone stopped talking. So go ahead.
Okay. I got to LeGarrette Blount, who just got signed with the Lions. 1-year contract, $2 million guaranteed. The man's 31 years old. He's won back-to-back Super Bowls here. He's one of the only running backs that's got the least amount of damage on his body because of other backs that he's played with. Do you think the Lions got a good deal for this? Yes or no? I guess that's my question to you guys.
Well,
Mr. Hirsch.
Shane, I think the Lions needed some help back there, and I think it can't be anything but a plus for them. I think that their new coach, Mr. Patricia, I think he knows better than anybody what he's doing with LeGarrette Blount, and it's got to be a plus. I mean, I always like Matt Stafford. The Lions are an adversary of my Packers, but the reason Matt Stafford hasn't been able to shine is because of a lack of supporting cast, and this is going to do nothing but increase the value of that Detroit Lions offense.
Yeah, I think it's a good move. 1-year deal, prove it deal. It's not going to hurt them. It gives more depth to the running back group, and he's been effective everywhere he's gone, like you mentioned earlier. I don't see any problem with this one. It's a win-win situation.
The one thing Matt Stafford has never had is a running game. And even if it's a running game that he can put a running back that can actually scare a team at the 1-yard line and one that can catch the ball, it would be something he's never had in his career.
Exactly. And I think that's a big thing for Detroit right now. You guys, I think, all nailed that one too, is 1 year guaranteed. I mean, what do you got to lose? And you got you got a back in there that can actually carry the rock a few extra yards for you to move the chain. So I do think it's a good deal for these guys at the Lions. My next one that I'm going to throw out there is going to be another 1-year contract. $7 million he signed for with 6.5 of it guaranteed. Going to the Texans from Arizona is Mr. Tyrann Mathieu. 25 years old, Mr. Playmaker himself.
Wait, what's his last name?
I can never say his last name.
Matthew. We're talking about the Honey Badger.
I could never say that guy's
trying
last
to say
name.
his name.
He always messes me up, that Tyrann.
Just call him Honey Badger.
And that's what I mean. You call him the Honey Badger, who's going now to J.J. Watts and the rest of that defense. Now, he's doing a 1 year, $6 million guaranteed. Is that a good deal for the Texans? Your choice there, Mr. Hirsch, yes or no?
Well, I think it is a good deal for the Texans, and I think it's a loss for the Cardinals, who really can't afford to lose anything of even negligible value. So it's got to be a plus for the Texans. Blaine?
I think he's a plus wherever he goes, 1-year deal or not. Yeah, that's a good deal. That's a good deal. It's a win-win situation with them too, because He's back on the market possibly next year, and he'll do nothing but help that secondary.
That's one of the few people in NFL history, even going back to the old days, that can play safety and slot corner better than most safeties in slot corner. I think that is something that is huge for a team that got burned in games with the best, most dynamic young quarterback last year in Deshaun Watson, who lost games 45-48 or whatever it was to Alex Smith. I think that is a huge, huge deal for them.
Oh, my God.
All right. No, and I totally agree with you guys on this one. I think it's going to be a big, big one for him in that. And I do think it might have been a bit of a salary cap issue with Arizona because of the money that he was going to generate. So he's off to the Texans. It's going to be big for them. My next one here is going to be
Shane. I just want to say one more thing though. Why they didn't sign him to a multi-year contract, I don't know. I don't understand. I mean, you grab somebody, when you land somebody like that, you want to hold them around for a while, don't you? I mean, they do need them.
But again, is it a money issue? Is it a disruption in that locker room? Arizona's gotten rid of all their quarterbacks right off the hop too. So who knows what they're doing?
Yeah, I want to change what I said about a win. I want to change what I said about a win-win situation. It might be a win for Matthew and a loss for the Texans.
Well, it's not a huge contract either. I mean, it's not like they paid him out of the ballpark type money, and it gives him a chance to prove himself. And I think his skin in the game with this is that if he puts in an outstanding season, he's going to be ready to sign again. He's not going to be locked into a mediocre contract.
That's why I say it's a win situation for him and a loss for the Texans because he'll be somewhere else with bigger money.
All right, we're going to my next guy. My next guy, and this one is going to be a huge one, is Mr. Teddy Bridgewater to the Jets. He gets a contract for 1 year, $6 million with $500,000 guaranteed, but he's got over $15 million with incentives if he can pull everything off. Now that is a huge, huge deal, and he's coming in lately with the attitude of, "Don't talk about my knee. Just let me get out there and show you that I can play and give me that chance." What is your take on this one, Mr. Hirsch? What do you think about him going there in the first place? And do you think he can get himself back to where he was potentially when he was playing good with the Vikings?
I have never been the biggest fan of Teddy Bridgewater, and I think everyone knows it. And certainly he was looking good when he had Adrian Peterson in the background to hand the rock off to 50% of the time. My only question about Teddy Bridgewater is how is he going to feel when he's back in the pocket and he feels everybody closing in on him? I think it's going to be a very interesting situation. This is a kid that hasn't played more than a couple downs since 2015, and he's got a lot to prove. And I'm just wondering if this is another flub on behalf of the Jets, a la Geno Smith, Mark Sanchez. I mean, they haven't made too many good decisions there behind center, and I'm just wondering about this. But I wish Teddy Bridgewater the best. I hope that he is successful. Blaine.
I like it. I think that as long as you make some valid points there, Mr. Hirsch, as long as he doesn't turn into a Sam Bradford and start falling down when somebody gets close to him to protect himself from that with that knee. In other words, I think Bradford is running scared now, and if Bridgewater can show that he gets past the first hit and past the knee injury, he's on a 1-year deal with incentives, meaning that he can prove himself. He can compete for the starting job because he's going up against McCown there. He has they'll most likely draft because of their recent move to move up. They're most likely going to draft a quarterback. So this is his chance to shine. And if it doesn't, if he gets some playing time and shows that he still got it, he can move on from New York if it doesn't work out there. So I think it is a great move for the Jets. I think it's a great move for Bridgewater.
Well, Blaine, he's going to have to get past a lot more than the first hit before he is proving anything.
Yeah, but they say the first hit is usually most players say after coming off an injury, once they get past that first hit, they're fine.
Well, we forget that his first hit resulted in him throwing a pick with the home crowd standing on their feet.
So he's got past the first hit.
Yeah, he's got past the first hit. I think
second
that
hit.
I think that Teddy is actually the third string quarterback on the Jets behind whoever they're going to draft at the very top, and I think McCown is better than Teddy and who they might even pick up right off the bat.
I think what I'm going to say on this last part of this is going to determine who can control that offense out there the best, is who's going to dictate that Jets team going forward. Which quarterback is going to be able to take place out there and be composed and understand the pressure that's coming and just go from there. And I think that's where they're going to make their decisive decision and then go from there. But I just think if he can come in with that type of a mindset and be ready, he's banking everything on incentives to get himself a great paycheck. So, I mean, I do think he's a lot more determined than most people are giving him credit for. But we're going to see when training camp comes exactly how well he is prepared for this and the rest of that season. So I'm going to move on to my next one here that I got. And that is going to be from the Rams. Oh, we should have had Coach Taylor on. I'm going to bring on Mr. Nickel Roby Coleman of the Rams. This guy's getting 3 years. 15 mil with 8 million guaranteed. All right. Now, he's the slot specialist, is set up perfectly. I mean, in between now they got Talib in there and they got Peters. I mean, is this a good fit for this young Rams team? I mean, the Rams, and I said this before, I think the secondary lacked leadership when it came to being out there in pressure moments, and they've shown that in the last bit of the season. Does this guy come in there and can he do the job that's also needed for the Rams and help them out? Mr. Hirsch, what's your take on this one?
I'm going to reserve my opinion on that because I just don't have one. So I'm going to pass over to Blaine.
Yeah, I don't really know. The Rams definitely need help in the secondary, but I don't know if this is the. I don't know. I don't know if this is a good contract.
See, Chris? I think this is a perfect example of where people misunderstand, like where people look at apples to apples, and even though apples are to apples, working on something clever to say here. Basically, they have everything set up with what they've spent, and they have enough money where the one thing they're lacking is a nickel corner, which in the NFL is a huge percentage of defenses now. The whole 3-4-4-3 really doesn't work except for on first down against a running team, which you don't really see a lot, and especially against the teams they're going to be playing against. You need that nickel corner. So I think the fact that they may have overpaid for what his value is. I mean, his name is, by the way, if you're going to be a nickel corner and your name has nickel in it, that's pretty cool. I've always just loved that. I think that's just an awesome fact. But if you're going to run a nickel scheme, and you have two, linebackers that you love, you have a great safety, you just got Akeem, you just got Peters on the outside, and need that one nickel guy to play inside, it's worth overpaying just a bit if you can afford it. I think it's actually, again, those gosh darn Rams in the NFC West. I think it's smart because overpaying for something that you need, like if you're a salesperson that has to drive 70, 80, 90 miles a day, a really nice car is a ton more valuable than just someone who walks to work. If that makes sense. And the fact that they need that space to really solidify, and they have the money because they really don't have the things behind them for the son of bum defense, which loves to have that those nickels and those safeties blitz. So you're going to have to do a lot of man to man in certain situations. I believe son of bum, if he says it's worth it, it's worth it.
I'm going to agree with you on that one there, Chris. I really am. Now, I'm going to go to one that is just the most interesting right now, and that is A.J. McCarron for the Bills. This guy gets a 2-year contract for $10 million with $7.9 million guaranteed. He's getting paid what a backup quarterback is normally getting paid to be the new starter for the Bills. What's your take on this one, Mr. Hirsch? Like it or not?
I think it's a good place for him to start, and I think that Mr. McCarron has been just itching to become a starting quarterback, and he wasn't going to get a chance to do that where he was, so I think he's happy about it. Uh, Apparently, the Bills are happy about it. What confuses me is why they let go of the quarterback that they had. I don't understand that one at all. But this is a big chance for A.J. McCarron, and I hope he makes the most of it. Blaine.
I think that the A.J. McCarron move was, as you said, it's a place for him to start, prove himself. He gets the chance to prove himself in Buffalo. How many years was this contract for?
2.
2
2
years.
years.
10 mil.
Okay, so it's not a long contract. So probably renegotiate if he proves himself or proves to be a success in Buffalo. Probably get an extension next year if they want to. Unless they want to wait till the new CBA comes along, like a lot of these other players are doing with these short-term contracts. I think this is a good signing. It's a good one definitely good for the Buffalo Bills. It's a low-risk contract. McCarron gets to prove himself.
Let me tell you what this screams out to me, and I apologize for all you A.J. McCarron fans. Your guy got paid $8 million less with less guaranteed money than Mike Glennon did by the Bears last year. He just signed a backup contract, and the Bills are going to draft one of the young studs. And you're going to be a backup again to someone that you're probably better than. And you might get a chance to come out and play. But my first hot take of the year is that A.J. McCarron is again a backup.
All right. No, and you know what I think there's a lot of things here of him going to the Bills to establish himself and say, listen, just give me the chance. I always needed the chance. Let me show you what I can do. And yeah, you got some money coming in, and maybe, and if you can prove yourself and they can do something out there, next thing you know, this guy's going to be another big name for them, and who knows what his contracts are going to be after. So I do think it's a good signing for them right now, and I do think it's going to help him in the long run too. My next one that I've got here is going to be Mr. Julius Peppers of the Panthers. He signs a 1-year, $5 million contract. It's like he takes a shorter amount of money for a year. You know, the home discount, as they like to say. I'm just curious about that one. I mean, it's he's 38-year-old defensive end, takes a cheap deal. What's your takes on this one?
Well, Shane, I love Julius Peppers. And, I looked at his age. He was on the Packers for a time there. And I was sorry to see him go because he came in there and he got the job done, and he's a real stud. He's old. Did you have a look at him? That guy's in better shape than 22-year-olds. He comes out there, he's chiseled and packed with muscle, and he wants to play. I say, God bless him. Let him play as long as he wants. And instead of retiring, he's got another contract with a little more moolah in the bank. Can't blame him for that. Blaine?
Yeah, it's not bad for a 92-year-old. I mean, I guess, I guess, yeah, I have nothing to add to that. He gets a chance. He gets to play for another year.
No, and exactly, right? I mean, no, I think Chris got tied up for a second. But you're absolutely correct. Look, he's got one more. He wants to stay there. He wants to do what he's got to do. So I think it's going to be it's a win-win in his way and for the team. So, I mean, I think it's a good deal all around. I'm going to go with a couple of honorable mentions, though. And one of them here is going to be with the Saints. And I think we all knew this would happen. I didn't think that he was going to take off and go anywhere else. But that is Mr. Drew Brees. He signs a 2-year, $50 million with $27 million guaranteed. Now, yes, he's that franchise guy, but they only sign him for 2 years. What's your take on this one, Mr. Hirsch?
Well, I think it's good common sense that Drew Brees is getting old. He certainly didn't show any, backing off of his skills last year, but I think they wanted to, they don't want to be indebted to him forever. So they're going to take a look, and then there's always the possibility of another re-signing, depending on how he's looking. So I think it makes sense for them, and I think it makes sense for him because he's comfortable with the scheme there. He knows the players. He's got those 2 dynamite running backs that are going to be behind him. I don't see any problem with this. I think it was a good move on everybody's part.
2 years more, and then he can retire. That's it. I think it's a good signing.
We're at the time of the year where it's always about a good signing, depending on who it is. Great take, everybody. Glad you guys listened in for the wisdom there. It's a great signing if it works out, but 2 years and it retires. The idea being is if it's going to work out, and I think that this is one of those deals where when people sign too quickly at this point in free agency, that's when I think people kind of miss out. And that's what I was going to talk about. Maybe later on with the Sherman deal is why sign so quick? Why not wait until training camp for certain people? But hey, I've never been a pro. I don't know, but I've always found that people get super desperate later on and kind of give a little bit of probably would have been worth a little more money. I think in the end, it's exactly what that guy's worth, and it's a valuable signing, and he adds value to the team.
And you're absolutely correct, and I think it is, and I do think the Saints, just like I think the Steelers, are also looking to say, what is going to be our future quarterbacks, and where are we going to start looking to bring somebody in this way? And I think that's going to be coming up soon.
Can I jump in real quick, Shane?
There you go.
Can I make one quick question about this? Because that generic answer was a little bit tough for me. Just real quick, yes or no, unless you guys want to expand on it. Not that he would have left, because he's like a saint in New Orleans, but would Minnesota have been better off with 2 years of him or 6 years of Cousins? When we go Hirsch, Shane Blaine.
Well, come on, Chris. You know what I'm going to say.
I know you hate him.
No, I don't.
You hate Cousins. You hate Cousins. You hate Cousins.
I don't hate Cousins. I think that he's just not an elite quarterback, which Drew Brees obviously has been over the long term. Maybe Cousins is going to notch himself up into that category, but we haven't seen that so far. I think Minnesota would have been far better off with Drew Brees at the helm for 2 years and Kirk Cousins riding the pines. And, take it.
All right, Shane, go ahead. Turn it back on you. Go ahead. You get your rapid fire.
Yeah, no, I think if you had Drew Brees at the helm of this Vikings team right now with the offense that they got and the defense they got, I think you're looking at 2 Super Bowls. And I think Brees,
oh my God.
Yeah.
Thielen
and Diggs and
exactly. And that defense, you better believe it.
Blaine?
You're talking to a guy who doesn't know why Case Keenum wasn't good enough for the Vikings and Kirk Cousins is. Of course, Drew Brees. This is hands down. Drew Brees would be a better deal for the Vikings than Kirk Cousins. He's overrated. Not Drew Brees, Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, so we're not going to talk about Broncos today, but I would say that the fact that Elway wanted him, and you look at who he's drafted over the last few years and brought in, makes me worry about Case Keenum. So I'm going to fire one back at you, Coach Shane, and then you can keep going around. What about all this love? And I know when we get to Hirsch, he loves this kid because he reminds him of someone that he loves. But what about all this love about KC and Mahomes and the fact that now they got Sammy Watkins, who didn't want to play for LA anymore? and now he's got two of the fastest outside threats and probably the best tight end when healthy, when Gronk is not healthy in the NFL, and that new kid at the backfield and all the other stuff that they got. What do you think about KC? Then I'll let you go back to the rapid fire.
Yeah, no, you know what? I think KC. Look at it. When they got Watkins, when they got Hunt in the backfield, when they've got the tight end there that can play, who's not injured himself, you got an offense. There's no question about it. Plus, this kid can also run if need be out of that backfield. So I do think he's got much talent. The problem that I'm going to see is the fact of when the offensive scheme starts going, what is his accuracy? How well is he going to handle the pressure? Because my thing is, I don't know if that O-line as the weeks went on was strong enough to keep themselves healthy, and they got blitzed a lot of times out there, and that pressure really got to Alex Smith. So this is what I'm trying to get at. This is going to be an interesting situation where he may have to take off like a Russell Wilson had to and get the yardage that's needed to keep moving the chains. But I do think if he can get his accuracy and everything like that, and he can figure out where his guys are, he might just surprise so many people this year. And I love that. I love Hunt in the backfield. I do. I think you give that guy the ball and you throw him that ball, you've got a win-win situation. Mr. Hirsch.
Well, having a good guy in the backfield certainly adds to the intrigue of what the offensive scheme is going to be, because you can't sit back there and say they're going to pass. Now, as far as Mahomes goes, yes, I like him. He's got a lot of spirit. He does remind me of Brett Favre, but that's also a problem. And the problem that I see here is these quarterbacks that are so mobile, they, as soon as they sniff a trouble, they run out of the backfield and they never learn how to go through all of their reads and then go through them again like the elite quarterbacks do. And these young players, and hopefully it won't persist as they age, they get to the second or third read and they're off and running. And maybe it was that fourth read or the second time around on the first read where there was a big gain there and they never got to it because they didn't have the discipline. I think this is a new player. He's sat on the bench for a year, more or less, but he's coming in and he's going to have to learn how to play big in order to be big. And elite quarterbacks go through all their reads. They don't make mistakes, and they hit their guys and they run as a last resort unless they plan to do it in the first place. Blaine?
I agree. Discipline to stay in the pocket is a big factor here. If the O-line is weak or struggling, once that quarterback runs out of the pocket, if he runs prematurely, then how do you defend him? How do you keep the rushers off him if you don't know where he is? I hear that Ben Watson is working on a contract with the Chiefs right now, so that'll be another piece that he'll have at tight end. So he'll have the weapons, but is this going to be is he a quarterback that can stand up in a shoot it out offense? Because that defense needs work, and that's what they need to start concentrating on for success this year. So let's see what happens in this offseason and the draft. But
well, Baltimore,
yeah, there are a lot of questions there.
Baltimore Blaine, that's one thing that I will say positive about Alex Smith is that he held up in the pocket. But
yeah,
and I want to introduce another question into the equation here, is the curse of Andy Reid. I mean, yeah, he's bringing in Mahomes. Yeah, he got rid of Alex Smith. Is Andy Reid able to lead a team to ultimate victory? And he's had good teams under him before, and they only got just so far. And yes, it looks like KC is stacked, and it looks like they're ready to go somewhere. But the proof is in the pudding, and I'm waiting to see it.
Well, I want to say something about the good point you made, kind of the old school thinking on the quarterbacks that run. Obviously, you guys know where I'm going with this. There's a quarterback who led the NFL in touchdown passes last year, who can run and runs for tons of yards a year, but he keeps his head up. And, that's Russell Wilson, obviously, who's also, set all those records, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I won't go into all the records. But at the same time, you saw a young
Yeah, just one more thing.
Who's about to shatter well, no, this is the same thing. You talked about quarterbacks that run and don't keep their head up and look downfield. It's a really great point that you made. But Russell is probably one of the first ones that's ever done it. And last year, you saw a rookie come into the league that was going to shatter every single rookie record until he got hurt, who did the exact same thing that you're talking about, who can run and can avoid, but was throwing for a ton, and that's Deshaun Watson. And people are talking about Mahomes being the next Deshaun Watson, the fact that, yes, he can run, but he would rather look downfield and throw across his body, ill-advised, crazy, Brett Favre-like. And I think that's where you might see that final change in the thought process of a running quarterback who gets scared and puts his head down and runs, as opposed to now finding quarterbacks that can put their head up. So I think that'll be something to look at, and I think that was actually a really good point, Mr. Hirsch. Shane,
well, Aaron Rodgers is a running quarterback too. He doesn't get a lot of credit for that. He's no Colin Kaepernick. He's no Russell Wilson. Always running. But it's because he's got other options too. But it's important to go through all your reads before you.
I think Aaron Rodgers has the most running touchdowns and passing touchdowns within the 10-yard line, basically meaning I'm going to throw it or run it myself. I mean, that's a really impressive. I might be off on the most, but I mean, it's pretty amazing. His red zone and inter-red zone stats are absolutely out of this world because of exactly what you just said. Hit us with another one, Shane.
Yeah, no, and I'm just going to finish up on that. I do think everything you guys have all said is correct in many, many ways, that this kid just needs to be balanced and being able to sit in that pocket. He's going to take a hit, but he sat in that pocket and gave a good throw. And he's also got to realize that there's nothing there and let me just move it or throw that ball away. So he's got to start making those smart decisions. And I think that's where Casey has to come into play and play that type of a game. But I'm going to throw a couple of quick ones out here again real fast. And this one's going to go Packers. They signed a D lineman in Mr. Muhammad Wilkerson for 1 year, $5 million with $1.5 million guaranteed. Is it a good deal, Mr. Hirsch? Is he going to help your Packers?
Well, I think he is going to help our Packers because that's somewhere we needed some help. We need a lot of help in the defense. We need cornerbacks, but that front line, and this is going back to what we were talking about with Julius Peppers. I wish he was still on the Packers. He was the guy that we needed, and I think that Muhammad Wilkerson is going to take his place, and he's going to do it well. He's a defensive lineman who's a pass rusher, and I think that putting pressure on the quarterback is going to be nothing but a benefit to the Green Bay Packers defense. And I'm happy to see him come with us, and I think it's a good deal.
I think it's a good.
Go ahead, Blaine. No, you go ahead.
I think. No, I don't have much to say. I was just going to echo what Mr. Hirsch said. I think it's a good deal for him. I think it's, you're adding a piece to the defensive line to get after the quarterback, and I can't see how it's going to hurt him.
Pressure up the middle has been the formula for success in the NFL on defense unequivocally for the last few years. Go ahead, Shane.
No, exactly. And I think you're absolutely correct. And I mean, it's a good contract all around. I'm going to give one to you there, Mr. Rose. Here it comes. The Seahawks sign a tight end, Mr. Ed Dixon, 3 years, 10.7 mil with 3.6 guaranteed. Yep. Good deal or not?
It is for what they're going to do. And what they're going to do is the fact that they have someone that a lot of people don't know about. If you look at him from last year, he's been on the team for a couple of years, named Nick Bennett from Ohio State, who was an absolute stud, who I think dropped one ball out of everything he's been thrown that's been thrown to him, but he's been behind Luke Wilson and Jimmy Graham. They're going to put him up there as their pass catching guy. They are trying to go back to more of a running team, and Ed Dixon is 10 times a better blocker. And the tight end market is really tough right now. And they tried for Austin Sperry-Jenkins. They tried for a couple other people. It looks like they don't find anyone that they want in the draft. They don't have a lot of draft picks. So once again, it's like we talk about car. If you work as a salesman driving 70 miles a day, it's overpriced for a team that has a lot of weapons. It's underpriced for a team that needs a blocker that can catch passes and run. And don't forget though, Ed Dixon on those 3 games where Greg Olsen was out last year for the Panthers, he caught over 100 yards and I think 3 or 4 touchdowns in those 3 games. So I mean, he's not a slouch catching the ball, but he's also a big man that can block and move the pile. And they really had a lot of salary freed up in that by losing their top 2 guys.
Well, I don't know what to say about this. Obviously, it looks like a great deal when taken in a vacuum. But when I look at this, I have to ask myself, Jimmy Graham out and this guy in? Is that a value? I don't know if I see it. I think I don't know what the Seahawks are doing. I think they should have held on to Jimmy Graham. Not that I'm not happy to have him teamed up with Aaron Rodgers and supply the missing piece to the Packers rushing or passing attack. But when you look at it in that context, I don't understand it. And while it's probably going to be a good deal for both the player and the management when taken in isolation, I just don't get it. Blaine?
I think it's a good deal. I want to remind you that Ed Dixon was a draft pick for the Ravens. He and Dennis Pitta were in the same draft. Just to go back to the Ravens. But anyway,
did he pass his physical?
He did pass his physical.
Oh,
yes, he did.
Oh, wow!
If I'm not mistaken,
I couldn't resist. You know, I'm always the joker in the deck, and whatever.
I'm going to invite you all. I'm going to invite you all to Loch Ness to search for Bigfoot after this. Okay?
Yeah. God bless you. Think that what happened in reality is not possible, but
it's your reality.
I know. I think you guys were smart and shady, just not whatever. Shane, why don't you tell us where we can find you, since you got all kinds of stuff going on? Because I have a feeling this conversation is not over as far as the Ravens are concerned.
Yes, sir. You know what? Thank you again, guys. You can reach me at mentaledgeperformance.ca. I can also get emails, coach@mentaledgeperformance.ca. Again, I'm right for USA Today as well as Train Fitness magazines and everything else. So please send us your emails too. I know, Mr. Rose, you're going to finish this off with so much. And next week, I want to maybe we need to touch a little bit on some of this Pittsburgh Steelers, so Dina can have something to get mad at us about it too.
Let's try and get her on a couple of times just to get mad.
Just one more thing. And I'm serious. You could find us at Facebook, Pigskin Preview on Mancini Sports. You could email us at knuckleheadpods@gmail.com. And please, when you go to our Facebook page, like us and tell all your friends to like us, because we like you. Mr. Chris Rose?
Yeah, and you're going to see until YouTube verifies us, which should be pretty quick here. We do have the sister network. Please make sure you subscribe and like. This YouTube cast is live, so you're going to hear a couple of hiccups and no music. But those of you who are listening to this on iTunes, Blog Talk, Stitcher, or on the Spreaker, you will hear a instrumental of an old Beatnut song for some guys from New York, bringing us in and out. And so once again, you guys on YouTube will get a little bit of little live hiccups of me dropping the mic for a second. But besides that, we love you guys, and we need your support. The likes, the subscriptions are huge for us right now. So please do that. And the Knucklehead Pods is the new group that we're going to work with, that we're going to do everything with. We'll have the show when we can on Tuesdays, and when it's available, we'll try and do our best coming up to the season. But everything on this network will be set in stone, and we got a lot of great stuff coming up, guys. So thank you so much. We love you. And for those of you who are hearing this great music, this is one of my buddies from my way back, taking us out with this great music. And for those on YouTube, man, we'll have some other stuff coming for you. Please hit that subscribe button. Love you guys. Goodbye.